Have you ever wondered why some people seem to get under your skin without saying much at all? It's not always what they do, it's what they trigger in you. You're walking through life trying to grow, trying to stay grounded, and yet certain people always seem to stir something up. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because your peace unsettles them. Your calm makes their chaos louder. Weak minds can't stand strong silence, so they provoke, they prod, they whisper little comments, hoping you'll explode, hoping you'll react, because if they can pull you out of your center, they feel powerful for a moment. But here's the quiet truth. Not every battle is worth entering, and not every insult deserves your energy. There's a deeper strength in restraint, a wisdom in staying unmoved. When you understand that, you stop reacting and start seeing clearly. You no longer chase being understood by those who feed off misunderstanding. In this video, we'll explore why weak people try to trigger you, and more importantly, how to rise above it with calm, clarity, and quiet power. If you've ever felt drained by the games people play, stay with me. What you'll hear next might just set you free. 1. They crave control, not clarity. Have you ever tried to make peace with someone only to feel more confused, more exhausted, more lost than before? You come to the conversation with calm intentions, wanting clarity, hoping for a solution, but instead they twist your words, deflect your meaning, and leave you doubting your own intentions. This doesn't happen by accident. Some people don't seek resolution, they seek control. And confusion is the ground where that control grows. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength. But to those who are ruled by disorder within, your calmness is a threat." They've never stood still long enough to face themselves, never sat quietly with their own contradictions. So when you show up steady, trying to speak plainly and listen deeply, they see a mirror and they recoil. Peace demands accountability. That's why they avoid it. Because to them, being seen clearly feels like exposure. And so they strike first, not with fists, but with misdirection, with sarcasm disguised as humor, with passive jabs that sting but leave no fingerprints. They want you entangled, not enlightened. I knew a man who was always just joking at everyone's expense. But when someone tried to speak honestly about a problem, he'd shrug, change the subject, or worse, blame them for being too serious. At first, people laughed it off, but one friend saw through the act and said, "You don't want truth, you want control over the room." And that was it. The mask cracked. Because those who avoid clarity often panic when the light gets too bright. Weak people don't fear conflict, they fear the silence that follows truth. Because in that silence, they'd have to listen to themselves. So they keep you spinning, arguing, clarifying, defending while they remain untouched. When you ask for understanding, they accuse you of overthinking. When you bring logic, they raise their voice. Why? Because a loud distraction is easier than a quiet reckoning. Here's the Stoic truth. Not every disagreement is a dialogue, and not every argument is worth entering. Some are traps designed to keep you circling the same ground, so you never rise above it. Epictetus said, "It is not he who reviles or strikes you who insults you, but your opinion that these things are insulting." That's the key. Once you stop granting their tactics your energy, their power fades. Let this be your reminder. You don't owe endless explanation to someone who fears resolution. The moment you stop reacting, they lose control, and when their chaos no longer feeds on your attention, it begins to starve. In the next part, we'll look deeper into how silence becomes your strongest defense when your calm is under attack. 2. Walk away from the storm. Have you ever tried to bring peace into someone's life, only to find yourself drained, unheard, and accused of being the problem? You offer understanding, clarity, even kindness, but nothing seems to reach them, not because you're failing, but because they're not listening. And they were never planning to. There are people who do not seek harmony. They seek chaos they can control, and every time you engage, you give them fuel. Epictetus said, "Any person capable of angering you becomes your master." That's the truth many overlook. The one who controls your reaction controls your energy. And if someone thrives off keeping you confused, off balance and doubting yourself, the only real way to win is to stop playing. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to explain yourself over and over. You step back. You get quiet. You remove the reaction they crave like oxygen. And suddenly, their power shrinks. I once watched a friend named Elijah try to fix a relationship with someone who constantly created problems that didn't exist. Every time he brought a solution, she brought a new problem. Every boundary he set, she pushed past it. She didn't want peace. She wanted attention. She wanted to feel powerful through his frustration. One day, he stopped replying, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. He said, "I realized I was the only one fighting for peace in a place designed for conflict." That was the turning point. Not in her behavior, but in his life. A Stoic does not chase storms hoping to calm them. A Stoic recognizes the weather and chooses the path through it. You are not a savior. You are not a sponge for someone else's mess. You are a rational being, capable of choosing where your attention goes and who is worthy of it. If someone refuses to meet you in clarity, let your absence become your boundary, not to punish them, but to preserve yourself. Seneca wrote, "He who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." How many times have you suffered, not because of what was said, but because you stayed too long trying to fix what was never yours? The person who doesn't want peace will always turn your effort into ammunition. So don't give them the tools to destroy your center. Let them spin. Let them stir. Let them drown in the noise they created. But you, step out of the storm. Let your stillness speak for you. Because in the next part, we'll explore how protecting your silence becomes the greatest form of strength. 3. Your calm is their mirror. Have you ever walked into a room and felt the tension rise, not because of what you said, but because of how quietly confident you were? That kind of calm unsettles people who've never found their own. You carry yourself without noise, without seeking approval, without trying to dominate. And for some, that silence is more threatening than shouting. Because when someone hasn't done the inner work, your stillness feels like judgment. Your grounded presence reminds them of everything they've been avoiding within themselves. Seneca once said, "A man at peace with himself is at war with no one, but to those who live in conflict, that kind of peace is foreign and dangerous." They've spent years moving from one crisis to the next, chasing noise to avoid reflection. So when they see someone steady, they don't admire it. They try to disrupt it. They question your boundaries. They challenge your silence. Not because they want understanding, but because they need disruption to feel alive. I knew a woman named Maya, soft-spoken, composed, the type of person who could bring calm into any space without saying much. But one co-worker, loud, dramatic, always in a storm, couldn't stand her. He'd joke about her being too quiet, accuse her of thinking she was better than everyone else. But the truth was, her calm exposed his chaos. She didn't play into his games, and that frustrated him. Because when you stop rising to the bait, when you stop defending your peace, you leave them face to face with their own disarray. And that's a reflection many cannot stand to look into. Some people believe conflict equals connection. That intensity means love. So, when you show up with presence instead of performance, they don't know how to receive it. They'll say things that sting, not because they believe them, but because they're testing your balance. But here's what they don't understand. Peace is not passivity. Peace is strength under control. Peace doesn't mean you don't feel the pain. It means you've trained yourself not to let it control your response. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. You have the power to decide what enters your spirit. You don't owe your reaction to every challenge, your stillness, your restraint, your ability to remain unmoved. These are your shields." In the next part, we'll explore how protecting that inner calm, even when under attack, becomes the ultimate strategy against those who mistake chaos for strength. 4. Self-mastery over self-defense. Have you ever kept your voice low in a room full of shouting, only to be called cold, distant, or uncaring? Not because you were unkind, but because you refused to be pulled into the noise. That reaction tells you everything. When you no longer hand over your stillness, when you no longer bleed just to make others feel whole, those who live in disorder won't thank you for your boundaries. They'll test them, they'll provoke. Not to find truth, but to see if your calm is real. Seneca once said, "He who is brave is free." And nothing makes you more free than emotional discipline, the ability to remain steady when others are unraveling. Most never learn this. So when they see it in you, they don't respect it, they resent it, because your silence reflects the chaos they've refused to confront. When you stop flinching, when you no longer explain yourself to people who twist every word, you become a mirror they can't control. And mirrors to the unprepared are uncomfortable. I remember someone who thrived on drama. Every conversation felt like a trap. He'd bring up old wounds just to get a rise. But when I stopped reacting, when I chose silence over defense, he escalated until I stopped engaging completely. His power evaporated, not because I won an argument, but because I stopped playing a game that wasn't mine. That's when I understood some people aren't looking for peace. They're looking for power over your spirit. And the only way to win is to remove the target. Peace, when practiced with intention, becomes a boundary. It separates who you are from who they want you to become. And people who depend on controlling others will always see your boundaries as betrayal. Let them. You are not required to explain your calm to those who fear their own silence. You are not responsible for teaching someone how to respect what they refuse to build within themselves. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That strength is why your stillness matters. You didn't stumble into it. You earned it through heartbreak, through endurance, through choosing not to be ruled by chaos. And now that you have it, protect it with everything you've got. Because your peace is not a luxury. It's your foundation, your clarity, your armor. Let the world rage. Let those who live off disruption try to pull you down. But you hold your ground. You don't owe access to anyone who treats your soul like a battlefield." In the next part, we'll step deeper into what happens when you master indifference and how it becomes the final move in reclaiming your inner authority. 5. Silence is how you win. Have you ever noticed how some people seem energized not by truth, not by presence, not by wisdom, but by your reaction? They don't feed on love, they feed on disruption. The moment you raise your voice, the moment your peace cracks, you've given them exactly what they came for. That's when they feel powerful. Not because they've earned anything, but because they've shaken something inside you that you were trying to hold steady. Seneca warned, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." And some crave control over your emotions because they've never built control over their own. They create chaos, not to understand, but to dominate the atmosphere. And they'll do it with precision. A sideways comment, a half smile loaded with implication, a question that isn't really a question. They don't want answers. They want you off balance, because when you're off balance, they can steer the story. I knew someone like that, a former co-worker named Darren, always calm on the outside, always watching. He'd ask questions that sounded helpful but carried barbs. Are you sure you're okay to lead this project? You seem a little stressed lately. He didn't want to help. He wanted a crack in your armor. And once someone responded with tension or defense, he'd pull back and act innocent. It was never about clarity. It was about control through discomfort. This is where Stoic discipline becomes your shield. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That strength shows itself when you no longer hand over your calm, when you can look into the eyes of someone trying to trigger you and remain unmoved. Not because you are numb, but because you have chosen what deserves your energy. There is a kind of power in silence that words can't reach. When someone is screaming for attention, for dominance, for a response, and they get nothing, it breaks something in them. Not because you hurt them, but because their usual method no longer works. You've outgrown the level they operate on. Your indifference becomes the mirror. And in that mirror, they see not your weakness, but their own emptiness. They will push. They will try harder. They will say things they don't even believe, just to get a flicker from you. But when you stay grounded, when you don't flinch, their voice begins to echo in a chamber where no one is listening. That echo drives them mad, because silence means irrelevance. And irrelevance is something they can't survive on. You don't have to match their volume to prove your strength. You don't have to explain your restraint. Your calmness is not silence, it is precision. It is self-mastery. It is the quiet refusal to be ruled by those who have no rule over themselves. When someone shouts to feel seen, your stillness says, "I've already seen you clearly, and I'm not afraid." The more grounded you become, the more their chaos will try to find a crack. But don't give them one. Let your peace be the answer. Let your silence speak louder than any defense. Because true influence doesn't come from controlling others. It comes from mastering yourself. If this part of the message resonates with you, comment below with Unshaken. And if you're finding clarity in this journey, subscribe so we can keep walking it together, one truth at a time. In the next part, we'll go deeper into how calmness, when practiced consistently, becomes the strongest form of influence in a world that's addicted to reaction. 6. Control is fear wearing a mask. Have you ever been around someone who never raised their voice, never gave orders, but still made you feel like you needed permission to breathe? That's the kind of control that doesn't scream. It whispers. It manipulates through guilt, quiet expectations, and unspoken rules. On the surface, it looks like care, but beneath it lies fear. Not fear of you, but fear of themselves. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. But those who seek to control others have never claimed that inner power. Instead of facing their own fragility, they manage everyone else. If they can control how you speak, when you show emotion, or whether you step outside the lines they drew, they believe they're safe. Not strong, just safe from facing the disorder they refuse to confront inside. I once knew a man named Joel, calm on the outside, always polite, but his relationships were cages. If someone laughed too loudly, he'd grow distant. If someone disagreed, he'd withdraw affection. His control didn't come with volume, it came with consequences. You were allowed to be free as long as your freedom didn't challenge his illusion of certainty. And the moment someone stepped into their own light, he'd feel abandoned. Not because they betrayed him, but because their growth revealed the parts of him that never moved. People like Joel often use kindness as leverage. They'll remind you of everything they did for you. They'll keep score. They'll offer help, but expect compliance. They don't want equal connection. They want unspoken control. And when you start reclaiming your space, setting quiet boundaries, choosing your own rhythm, they panic. Not out of hatred, out of fear. Fear that without power over you, they'll be forced to sit with what they've been running from all along. Stoicism teaches us that true strength lies not in controlling others, but in mastering the self. Epictetus said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." So when someone is obsessed with managing everything around them, it's not power, it's avoidance. And when you remove yourself from their grip, they lose more than influence. They lose the distraction that kept them from facing their own unhealed life. You are not here to be molded by someone's fear of uncertainty. You are not a reflection of their need to feel powerful. And love, real love, doesn't come with strings or silence. It comes with honesty, with the courage to say, "I'm afraid," without needing to dominate. If someone sees your growth as a threat, your clarity as rebellion, your voice as defiance, it's because they were never prepared to meet you in freedom. But you can still rise. You can still choose peace over control. In the next part, we'll uncover how guilt is often the final tool of manipulation and how to stand firm when your freedom makes others uncomfortable. 7. Own what triggers you. Have you ever felt yourself react before you could even think? A look, a comment, a moment, and suddenly your chest tightens, your voice rises, your focus disappears. You weren't speaking from strength. You were reacting from an old wound. That is how people gain power over you, not by force, but by tapping into what you haven't yet mastered. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself," and mastery begins with awareness. Every trigger you carry is an open invitation. It reveals something you've not yet reconciled within. The insult that cuts deep, the silence that rattles you, the rejection that shuts you down, these are not random. They are rooted in something you've yet to face. And if you don't own it, someone else will. I remember a young woman named Elise, brilliant, calm, kind. But every time someone questioned her ability, even lightly, she spiraled. Not because their words had weight, but because her self-worth still depended on external validation. She didn't argue, she over-explained. She tried to prove herself. And that effort, though well-meaning, gave others silent permission to pull her away from her path. She wasn't being controlled by others. She was being controlled by her need to be seen. This is where the Stoic path calls us to pause. Marcus Aurelius reminded us, if you are disturbed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. So ask yourself, not just what triggered you, but why did it land? What fear did it touch? What belief did it awaken? The goal isn't to be emotionless, it's to be intentional. It's to know your inner landscape so deeply that no one else can navigate it better than you. When you react blindly, you give power to the moment, but when you reflect, you regain your ground. Silence becomes a decision, stillness becomes a signal. The people who once stirred chaos in you will begin to feel invisible, not because you hate them, but because they can no longer reach you. And that's the quiet power of self-command. Let your triggers become teachers. If someone gets under your skin, let that moment guide you inward, not outward. Not every fire is meant to be put out. Some are meant to illuminate the parts of yourself you need to understand. Your growth isn't about avoiding pain. It's about learning how not to be ruled by it. In the next part, we'll explore how to stay grounded when others try to invade your calm, not with aggression, but with subtle strategies meant to test your sense of self. Because the more unshakable you become, the more they'll try to shake you. But you'll be ready. 8. Silence is strategic power. There comes a point when you realize that not every battle deserves a reply. You've been there. Someone throws a sharp word, expects a reaction, waits for the fire. But instead, you offer stillness. And in that moment, the loudest thing in the room isn't their voice, it's your silence. That silence unsettles them. Not because it's empty, but because it's full of strength they cannot control. Seneca once wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity." For he is not permitted to prove himself. But the highest proof of strength isn't how loud you respond, it's how little you need to. The ones who crave conflict don't understand that. To them, your silence is rejection. It's cold, it's confusing, but in truth, silence is the Stoic's boundary. It draws the line not in anger, but in clarity. It says, "I no longer offer my peace in exchange for your noise." There was a man I once knew who loved stirring things up, always needing to be right, always waiting for an argument. He would say something just to provoke, and when others reacted, he'd grin, satisfied, as if he had won something. But I stopped replying. No explanation, no defense, just calm. Over time, his voice lost its grip because my silence gave him nothing to hold on to. That was when I understood the true power of detachment, not apathy, but sovereignty. People who feed off your energy cannot survive without your attention. They want your reaction because it gives them relevance. Your fire is the fuel they count on. And when that fuel runs dry, they're left to face something much harder than your words, themselves. Silence becomes a mirror. In it, they meet the consequences of their own choices. No blame to shift, no drama to distract. Just themselves and the reflection they've long avoided. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." Your silence is not submission, it's transcendence. You don't explain, you don't chase, you don't lower yourself to a level built on manipulation and ego. Instead, you rise above it, not by climbing, but by letting go. That silence isn't passive, it's precise. It's the quiet refusal to surrender your energy where it won't be honored. Let them say you've changed. Let them call you cold. What they don't see are the nights you chose forgiveness over vengeance, discipline over chaos, distance over destruction. You've evolved, and your silence is proof. It's how you protect what took years to build. It's how you honor your journey, not by reliving every wound, but by refusing to reopen it for someone who only comes back to scratch it deeper. And as we move forward, we'll see that silence doesn't just guard your peace. It prepares you to walk away without anger, without regret, and without ever looking back. 9. They had access, not power. Have you ever looked back and realized someone didn't actually hold power over you? They just had access. Access to your kindness, your attention, your willingness to engage. They never controlled you. They only reached the parts of you that hadn't yet learned to guard your peace. That's the illusion they fed on. And when you take that access away, everything changes. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Many confuse reaction for control. They believe that if they can pull an emotion from you, they still matter. But that's not power. That's dependency on your response to feel significant. And the moment you go quiet, The moment you step back with calm rather than confrontation, they're forced to confront what they truly had. Temporary access, not lasting influence. I knew a man named Royce who always played emotional games. He knew exactly what to say to spark a response. He mistook my silence for defeat, my boundaries for coldness. But what he never understood was that I had simply stopped offering him the part of me that once needed to explain, to prove, to justify. He hadn't changed. I had. And when I stopped reacting, he stopped mattering. Not because I hated him, but because I outgrew the version of myself who tolerated confusion. That's the shift they never see coming. No dramatic exit, no long speech. Just silence, stillness, presence. And in that absence, they finally see their reach was never that deep. It only felt powerful because you were generous with your energy. When you reclaim it, the illusion collapses. The ones who thought they owned your emotions now find themselves talking to a memory. People confuse past influence with current relevance. Just because someone once made you feel something doesn't mean they still hold space in your heart. Growth is when that sting fades, when their tactics fall flat, when their words echo in silence because you've moved on. It's not about becoming hard, it's about becoming wise. It's about discerning who truly deserves access to your peace. Seneca said, "No man is crushed by misfortune unless he has first been deceived by prosperity." And in the same way, no one controls you unless you've first handed over the reins. But the Stoic path teaches us to return to self-command, not by fighting louder, but by standing still when provoked, by walking away when challenged, by refusing to bleed for those who treat your grace like a weakness. You don't owe anyone access to your mind, your voice, or your peace. When someone loses access, they may try to rewrite the story. Say you're cold, say you're weak, say you've changed. And they're right, you have. You've changed from someone who needed to be heard into someone who's already free. That's the quiet triumph. That's how you outsmart them, not with vengeance, but with evolution. And in the next part, we'll talk about why walking away isn't an act of pride, but an act of deep inner clarity. 10. You awakened, they remained. There's a strange kind of ache that comes when you look at someone you once held close and realize they were never meant to lead your life, only to pass through it. You shared space, energy, laughter, maybe even love, but what they mistook for authority was simply borrowed access. You allowed them near your thoughts, near your heart, near your quiet hopes, and they assumed that nearness gave them control. But closeness is not command. Presence is not purpose. And one day you finally see it. Epictetus said, "People are not disturbed by things, but by the views they take of them." And for too long, you may have taken someone's presence in your life as essential, when really, they were just loud. They weren't leading you forward. They were just standing close enough to sound convincing. But clarity has a way of arriving silently. One morning, you stop explaining yourself. You stop offering pieces of your soul in exchange for crumbs of validation. You don't become hard, you become whole. I once watched a woman spend years trying to earn respect from a man who offered attention but withheld honor. He praised her when it suited him, withdrew when she stood tall, and always left her wondering if she was too much or not enough. But she didn't rage when she realized the truth. She didn't scream or plead. She just shifted. He spoke, and she no longer leaned in. He reached, and she no longer flinched. Her clarity made more noise than any argument ever could. That's what wisdom does. It doesn't make you colder, it makes you clearer. You no longer need to explain your silence. You no longer seek to be understood by those who profit off your confusion. You see through their patterns. You recognize the tactics. You feel the hooks in their words, but they no longer land because you've stepped back, not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. The access is gone. Seneca reminded us, as long as you live, keep learning how to live. And in this life, one of the hardest lessons is learning that not everyone who enters your space deserves to stay. You don't need to block them. You don't need to declare war. The most powerful boundary is internal. It's the moment when your attention no longer rises for someone who once held your entire focus. That's when they feel it. That's when the silence grows louder than any goodbye. They may call it pride, they may call it distance, but what they're really witnessing is your elevation. They just don't have the language for it. You're not playing cold. You've simply stopped offering warmth where it was wasted. You don't hate them. You just refuse to betray yourself anymore. That stillness, that restraint, that stoic strength. Let them tell their version. Let them whisper in rooms you no longer walk into. Let them say you changed, because you did. You stopped living for applause. You stopped answering to manipulation. You stopped mistaking noise for connection. You didn't lose your compassion. You just directed it inward. You didn't lose your heart. You just placed it in safer hands, your own. It's a strange thing watching someone reach for a version of you that no longer exists. They press the same buttons, speak the same lines, expect the same outcome, but nothing happens. No rush of emotion, no need to correct the narrative, just peace. Because when you stop being available to emotional games, you force others to meet themselves, and many don't know how to do that. The absence of your reaction reveals more than your presence ever could. They'll feel it in the silence, in the rooms you used to light up, in the places where your laughter used to echo, in the energy that now feels colder because it no longer bends around them. And maybe, just maybe, they'll finally realize what they lost was never just your time, it was the privilege of access. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." And you, in choosing silence over spectacle, presence over performance, dignity over drama, you've already won. You didn't have to destroy them. You just stopped letting them define you. And in doing so, everything they built on your availability collapsed. As we bring this journey to a close, remember, not everyone who walks beside you deserves a voice in your story. Choose your counsel wisely, guard your energy fiercely, and let your clarity be the gatekeeper that keeps chaos out. In the end, peace is not given, it is claimed, and today you reclaim it. If no one reminded you today, let this be it. You are not wrong for choosing peace over noise. You are not weak for walking away from what once held you. You are rising into clarity, into strength, into the person you were always meant to be. You owe no one the version of you that forgot your worth. If this message spoke to something deep in you, consider subscribing so we can walk this path together. And drop a comment below with calm winds if you're reclaiming your power in silence. The next video will go even deeper into how to protect your energy when tested. Until then, stay grounded, stay focused, and remember, you're not here to be shaken. You're here to lead yourself forward. The power was always yours.